Everybody to the Jeremy Lee Sports Cards live segment of Hobby Palooza. Great couple days of content here on the Bench Clear Media Network on YouTube. I want to thank the organizers and everyone who came before, and Ray from Philly, who's going to be following up. I'm joined by my friend Matt Cyrulnik, Matty C on Instagram, a vintage connoisseur with a great collection. And we're going to be talking today about, during our 15-minute segment, about the
everything.
The appeal, Matt, the appeal of low and mid-grade vintage. I recently had an episode on my show on Sports Cards Live last Saturday with my guest, Deep Value Investor, and it was a very controversial episode in that he has a theory that only the best of the best will retain value. And the comments have been fast and furious as I've shown a few reels, and you got involved in some of those comments earlier today, Matt. And I thought, what a great topic to come back and maybe do a counterpoint to that and just sort of discuss, why mid-grade, low-grade vintage of some players, maybe not all, will remain desirable and in demand as time goes by and even as generations go by. So let's just get into it, Matt. I mean, you saw some clips from the episode that I did, and you heard Brent's takes on some of the things. And without, I don't want to really like attack anybody's theories or attack sort of, how he or anyone that believes the theories that he believes in, how they're approaching the hobby. I'd rather focus more on an alternative way of focusing the hobby, the way you approach it. And I've done some live streams with you before. And so why don't you start by just telling myself and the audience sort of what is your approach? What sort of cards do you add to your personal collection?
Well, I'm glad you started out with it that way because I was hopeful you'd frame things that way, because I don't think there's any right or wrong way to approach. I was going to say collecting, but the hobby, because maybe people approach it as collectors, maybe as investors, maybe as a hybrid of the two. So I don't think that there's any, like you said, point counterpoint, rebuttal. And again, I only saw a few seconds of that a friend brought to my attention. So with that said, I think that number one for me, it's collect what you like, right? Even buy what you like, buy what gives you enjoyment. I think that's the capstone. I think that glows above everything, right there, because I have things that are low to mid grade. I have some things from like the 80s or 70s that are high grade because the card appealed to me and it fits in budget. So I think that really needs to be stated. I think a lot of things that I know some of my friends in the hobby who reached out to me and said, take a look at this. And again, you and I just spoke a few moments ago, so I'm barely situated from a trip. But I think it's all about saying that up front, right? And not presenting a point of view as the point of view, right? I think that needs to be said, because otherwise one runs the risk of coming across as if this is the way to go, this is the way to do this. And then and there are people all across the spectrum. A guy reached out to me. I was trying to fire off some helpful collecting advice, between plane and airport and Uber. And he was asking me, how do I think about backs? If the card looks great on the front, what kind of premium should I pay? And I said, think about the back how you like to think about the back. If the back is something that matters to you and you don't like that there's paper loss or damage on the back, act accordingly. For me, I love something that looks on the front like it's 5, 6, 7, let's say near mint, right? That has that presentation, even if there's a subtle wrinkle, whatever that I can't see. But if the back has damage, it doesn't bother me at all. Yeah. But that's just me. I can't say that the way I do it, the way that I select, it's like we don't do that with our mates, you know what I'm saying? Whether it's friends or lovers. So why are we going to do it with the cards, So I think that's really, before we even get into that, it's about not buying there's too much of, do I need to buy, not me, but I'm saying saying themselves, what are other people going to want? What are other people going to like? You know what I mean? It's like what I do for a living, right? It's like, I don't write to, yes, you want to entertain, right? But you have to be true to your collection and your tastes, not to other people, right? You don't right thinking, what are the buyers going to think? Because then what's there is soulless, right?
Unless you're not unless you're not a collector, but we are here. We're here talking as
Correct.
collectors today, not as flipper. And as a collector, I kind of do consider myself, while I'm collecting, I do think about getting out of my cards at the end of the day, when I'm 75 years old, 80 years old.
Sure.
So a long-term investment, if you will, as a hold. And so I think, I like how you mentioned, if the back has some paper loss or some staining, and that's going to bring down the overall grade, but the front presents much better. I love cards like that. I love a card that is in like one condition. Is that fair or good? I'm not even sure. Like a one with one little thumbtack hole through the top border.
Yeah, sure.
Otherwise, the card looks like it's in near mint shape, but it has that one little hole in it, so it's been downgraded to a 1. Give me those all day long.
And we can pivot, even as collectors. There's certainly an appetite to talk about the investment or value holding side. So let's even do that. Buyer pool, eye appeal. These are variables these are nuances that a reductive, oversimplified analysis of the space that is vintage is going to have a glaring blind spot to these nuances, right? If you've ever tried to sell a $100,000 card, $200,000 card, right? The air is very thin up there, right? Now you buy something in the $1,000 space or $10,000 space or $20,000 space that looks beautiful, that looks like it should be, that it merits or exceeds the grade. The buyer pool is much deeper and broader, and its eye appeal creates competitive demand.
Yeah.
And that is why, even as an investment, right, the notion that you should only stick to high grade flies in the face of the key and first axiom that we hear as collectors, which is buy the card, not the holder. If you're buying high grade, it's the definition of buying the holder, not the card. Are you collecting stickers or are you collecting cards? I mean, look, there's a place for sticker collectors. It's called the registry. I mean, I have friends, and I don't say that in a pejorative way. I have friends that have said to me, "Oh my God, what an idiot! I can't believe I spent much." But there's an acknowledgement that they're addicted to raising that GPA. But I think the notion that if you just obey the sticker and buy into that somehow it's going to be a shrewd investment, I'm not so. I'd contend that if you have a beautiful 1, 2, 3, 4 grade card, right, that everyone in that buyer pool is going to clamor for because it grants you the visual eye appeal of something much, much greater, that's going to be more hotly contested by more buyers at auction than an ugly 7 or 8.
Yeah. Let's John, let's bring up Bob Boozle's comment at 3:06 your time, because it's exactly what you're saying. He says more people are going to be available at a moment's notice to buy a low-end mantle than $1 million mantle. And that kind of, I mean, it's so true. And it almost flies in the face of the whole, this 80-20 rule or this 99-1 rule that, only the top 1% or 0.1% of all the cards are going to have value down the road. I think that may apply in some other.
But what does down the road mean? Meaning, here I am down the road from when I bought so many cards that I have, or if we're going to play the money game, they've gone up tremendously, more so than higher grade counterparts. So what is down the road, right? Is down the road, again, the speaking in absolute terms, right, is where things get problematic, right? Because what is one's investment horizon? And there's a major loophole around all of that, which is if you buy your cards for pure enjoyment and look at them as a luxury item, as a luxury good, right? No different than a car or a piece of clothing or something, then you're enjoying them for that, right? And so if you get expectation management is key, right? What's your expectation? If you're buying it thinking I want to sell this in 10 years and make a profit, well, you're pretty safe and you're more readily liquid, which is another thing people got to think about. Because again, selling in the 6+ digit space, it's not easy to do. Right? It's much easier to find a buyer for a pretty $10,000 card or $30,000 card or $300 card than it is. And people are more willing, therefore, to pay a bigger premium, right? So I think also what we need to talk about is what defines what's best, I was talking to a friend of mine. I don't want to drop his name because he'll get inundated. He's a brain I love to pick in the hobby. I'll just go so far as to say he's a senior person at Heritage. And I love talking to this guy. I love his brain. And he and I were talking a few days ago, and he advanced a notion with which I agree. And again, it's not to slight these cards, but he was saying that his viewpoint for the future, and no one has a crystal ball, is that, and again, I agree wholeheartedly, is that let's just call them unattractive high grade cards, really off-centered cards. I don't give a shit if it's a 52 Mantle or if it's a 33 Gouty Ruth. They are going to kind of collect dust no matter what the sticker says, because high grade cards are going to need to look the part for people to shell out for them. If they don't look the part or exceed the part, right, it's going to be a problem. Whereas cards, let's define what's best, Jeremy, right? He said to me, more than 6 of 10 Gouty Ruths or 52 Topps Mantles were coming out of the factory really off-center. So a lot of us buyers, myself included, this gentleman included, we won't even look at a card if it's not centered. So then how is an off-centered 7, 8, 9, 10 really a great investment play, right? So again, we have to crop and zoom. You have to parse. You have to consider eye appeal, centering, focus. That's what makes what's best. What's best is the prettiest card, not the highest number on the sticker, right? So you can't just blanket everything.
No, you can't. You can't. The generalization is the generalization also assumes that the cards are properly graded, that the cards are not altered or trimmed or anything like that. And you talk about, first of all, when are you going to move out of these cards? What are the prettiest of the prettiest card for the grade? I think that all, and the buyer's pool, it's thin air up there, so there's going to be a bigger market for cards that are more affordable, obviously, down the road. And I think a lot of people who can't afford 6-figure cards, 5-figure cards, still want to own cards. We being me and all of our fellow collectors, we still want to own cards down the road. So along with a bigger buyer pool, I think that will support values of low and mid-grade cards that are at least average for the grade or better. I think there's going to be a large buyer pool for that. The other thing I think that works against the super high end, the super high grade cards, is the growing concern for slabbed altered cards, trimmed cards. I think that is going to scare. I think that's scaring people. Maybe not yet, but I think it will scare people.
And to be fair, that happens across the spectrum.
The super high grade cards. So go ahead.
No, I was saying, to be fair, I was just interjecting that does happen all across the spectrum. I'd say it's probably more prevalent, right, when you're taking something that's 100 years old and making it look mint. Certainly, I think that's a safe bet. But again, I think the notion of what is best really needs to be examined, right? And I would then, for me, and I think for a lot of buyers, it would start with what has a focused image that's evenly framed, aka centered, right? Those are the cards we're going to be looking at, whether it's a 4, or whether it's a 7, right? And I think the 2, 3, 4 that's centered and focused. Let's take a 144 Gouty Ruth, just pops into my head. You take that, and I'll put a dead centered, beautifully focused 3, 4-ish card that has no or very serendipitously placed wrinkles over a really off-centered blurry 7. I'll take that over enjoyment, and I'll take that over investment. So then if that's a fact, how is high grade in every case superior? And like you said, to your point, then what? Are we all supposed to just chase PSA 1052 Mantles and then not collect and enjoy the hobby? That's farcical.
Well, I think the other thing that when we're talking about cards as investments, the one thing about traditional investments that sports card investments, and again, the collectors who also look at their cards as investments, I don't want this to be an investment discussion, but the one,
because that's not what I am. I mean, I'm a little bit of both. When we're past a certain point, everyone's got a budget critical mass, a threshold over which they have to consider the
exactly.
safety of the holding of the value.
Yeah, I always say consider what's significant money to you. If you're outlaying significant capital from your resources into a card, you have to think about what the exit of it
Yes,
eventually. Or
correct.
if you're okay with going to zero, then you're okay with that. But you have to be that has to be something that you can really afford to happen. So
Correct.
yeah, we're talking about what cards are going to remain desirable. There's, oh, sorry. What I was saying was the key difference between a traditional investment and a sports card investment is the nostalgia associated with it. I don't think there's any nostalgia in owning any stock or ETF or mutual fund or bond. There's no,
no.
Or even real estate as an investment. There's no nostalgia, there's no emotional value to this stuff unless you're attached to the house that your grandparents built and lived in and all that. But that's few and far between. So I believe that because there are so many people out there who love sports and who love to feel an attachment to sports through their cards, that this nostalgic value that we all feel, that the emotional value that we feel for our cards, is what's going to ensure not only that, but also the connection to history. Because a lot of people will say, well, you never saw Ty Cobb play. You never saw Babe Ruth play, Mickey Mantle play. But I say to that, I don't need to have seen them play. I can study them. I have all the information at my fingertips. I can learn more about them now than I could have learned about them in the 60s, because there's
look at the market, though. Look at all the data.
And I can develop that nostalgia. And as time moves forward, people are always going to remember the history and want to connect to the history of this sport and the pastime. So my question next to you, Matt, is, I do believe that there is a ratio of players that are going to be worthwhile holds from a financial perspective down the road. Because, for example, I used to chase the set registry for Hall of Famers. And then I realized that I have no emotional connection to Ralph Kiner and many others. So I sold my Ralph Kiner rookie card because I didn't even know who he was other than his name showed up. I know he played for the Tigers now, but I had no connection to him other than the fact that he was a Hall of Famer. So, I feel like, and I want to know your thoughts on this in the chat as well, as the decades roll on, will some of those more fringe type Hall of Famers lose their luster and not be pursued 20, 30 years down the road from now? Will all the Hall of Famers be valuable and even in low, like pretty for the grade, all these things, or will it narrow down to the best of the best?
First question is, to how many prospective buyers does the card in question need to appeal to sustain its value? Ralph Kiner, who entered the league as a rookie and proceeded to lead his league, and I think 7 times, 6 of those were all of the majors and homers, which if someone did that today, holy shit, right? So what that guy did, aside from dating Liz Taylor, was outrageous, and Mets fans growing up, Kiner's corner, etc. But the point is, a beautifully centered copy of Kiner's rookie doesn't need everyone in the hobby to chase it for it to maintain its value, right? Based on where it is now. Secondly, before really getting into the bullseye of what you were just asking, when you talk about desired, down the road, when I was taking some of my cards to the bank a few weeks ago, passed off my son's, spoke with his hitting coach in the cage, and I said, "Oh, you're gonna, maybe get a kick out of this." He was like all into like, "Wow, look at this 1915 Joe Jackson. Oh, look at this Babe Ruth." You knew who these names were. His imagination was tickled by the age of those pieces and the palpable sense of history that they have, right? There's a charm to those old pieces. So here we are in 2023. That argument is so absurd to me of, well, no one saw them play. What is a 1, 2, 3 Crackerjack Joe Jackson doing right now? No one buying that shit saw him play, right? It's just that alone explodes that argument, right? So the notion that 20 years from now, somehow the pattern that's existed for the last 20 years for guys like me and you buying Mantle and Gehrig and Ruth and DiMaggio and Satchel Paige and Jackie Robinson and Shoeless Joe and Ty Cobb, right? I mean, damn, there's an Ed Delahanty guy batted 400 3 times, 1887 All Judge at Heritage right now. It's got a month left, it's already 10 grand. Who saw him play? Clearly enough people desire that piece, and it continues to go up. So the data just doesn't remotely support this specious. It's so specious. It's like on the surface, well, no one saw him play, so there won't be demand. That's insane. Look at the demand for historical documents, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on and on and on. So I think that needs to be quickly jettisoned to the curb where it belongs. I do think that there's an answer to your question. Surely the more popular, enduring names, right? There's no denying there's more demand for Ruth than, say, Rogers Hornsby, right? Whose rookie card, from the 1917, the Collins McCarthy issues of that year, still it sells fantastically when it surfaces. So again, there's still enough demand for it to be a great investment, right? So the notion that only the most popular, sure, those will be wanted by the most people, right? But again, it only takes 2 guys bidding to create value. Doesn't need 1,000. There aren't 1,000 bidders impacting the price. It's like the final 2, right? So, and where will they chase it? So, but that said, sure, if you want to make pure investment bets, Jeremy, you can certainly say Ruth, Gehrig, Mantle, Ty Cobb, Shoeless Joe, names like that. Names that, obviously, I'm not going to rattle off an exhaustive list, but Ted Williams. Because if you're a fan of the game, you're going to look into history, right? And again, like you said about Kiner, there have been guys where I've done the inverse, guys where I've read about them and because I have a hunger, I have an appetite to learn about history. I didn't know them from Joe, and then all of a sudden I read about them, really find their story compelling, and then went out and bought the card. Yeah. So here's brand new demand is created out of education and curiosity. So you can't discount that dynamic at play also.
I wanted to shout out Signature for Soldiers, the charitable organization that Palooza is supporting. You can make a PayPal donation. The email for the PayPal donation is on the ticker right now. Again, Signatures for Soldiers. So shout out to Bench Clear and all the organizers of this event for that generous initiative. I want to talk about another concept, Matt, that it's one of these mantras in the hobby, and it's not just in sports cards. It applies, I think, to a lot of different collectibles, which is buy the best you can afford. And I want to, before I let you speak, I just want to speak. I want to kind of explain how I've always looked at that, and it's a mantra or a way to approach the hobby that I've always struggled with, because people will tell you that all the time, just buy the best you can afford. Well, hold on a second. If I spend all my money on the best, on that one card, I got nothing else left to spend money on. So for somebody like you, and I mean, you have an eye for quality cards. I mean, I like when you do on Instagram, you'll put up a post, you'll put up 233 Lou Gehrigs right beside each other. You won't show the grade at first. You'll show them, and they look almost identical. And then on the next slide, you'll show what they sold for and the grade. And one of them might have sold for $275,000, and the other one might have sold for $22,000. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking to myself, I could buy they're virtually identical. There's a flaw. There's obviously a technical flaw on the lower
not one you
card,
can see.
but I can buy that lower graded card and be sitting on $250,000. And this,
More.
We're talking big numbers here, but this works all the way down. You can spend $500 on a card or $15,000 on a card. The same card, they look almost the same, but maybe you flip them over, there's something wrong. So, I love that approach. I love the approach, and I just did that myself. I had a PSA 8 Bobby Orr rookie that I didn't feel was super strong. I thought, you know what, it's a PSA 8, but I don't love the card. I also had a 5.5 that I thought was I liked it as much, if not more. Centering, no border, surface wear. I sold the 8 and I kept the 5.5, and I pocketed the difference. So that's cash that I can go spend on other cards. And I posted up on Instagram, said, what would you have done? Not that I care what other people would have said, because I knew I was very comfortable with my decision. But some people said, oh, I would have, it's a mistake. You always keep the 8. I said, well, but why? Like, I don't like the card as much. It's not even as nice as this 5.5. So, I'm with you on this. And I just want you to speak a little bit about your own approach and how you look at these things.
So me personally, it's I would call it pound for pound. Again, you got to define what's the best. Well, buy the best. Reminds me of a line in I think it was the movie The Departed, where he's like, "Key bono, like who profits?" And the guy goes, "Key gives a shit." The point being, like, who's saying that? That phrase largely came out of the grading companies. Buy the best you can afford, of course, because they want you to pay a huge sum for their highest sticker grade items, thereby enhancing the value proposition of their company. So of course they want to hammer the messaging of buy the best you can afford. And the trick there is they want you to link in your brain the best with the highest grade. But that's not the best card, right? Again, I've got posts left and right on my collector page about that, right? Where some of them you can't really, like you said, you can't see a difference. I posted a $670,000, $640,000 Gehrig with a $19,000, $20,000 Gehrig. You can't look at those in hand and go, this one is $640,000 better. That's absurd, right? Yeah. And so then what's best, right? What's best? So what I do, and again, personally, because if someone's doing the registry, they're not going to agree with this. I go pound for pound, right? A 3 that hits my eye like a 7 is better than a 7 that hits my eye like a 5, right? I personally don't see any hole in that logic, right? Someone trying to tell me a 7 that is off-centered and tilted and blurry and maybe trimmed on top of it is better than a beautiful full-size 3, get bent. There's no way. There's absolutely no way. For me, for how I collect, and no amount of ubiquitous or incessant messaging of buy the best, I go, yeah, sure, yes, I do buy the best I can afford. I buy the best looking card in my budget, irrespective of what number is on the sticker. Again, I want the lowest grade. I want the lowest grade because it allows me to expand my collection, allows me to keep more cash for myself and what I want to spend it on in life. So why get bamboozled and tricked into building value for grading companies?
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense to me. It's a head shaker, really. Again, on buying the best you can afford, and even the best for the grade that you want, or if you're targeting like a beautiful 4 as an example, and you're going to spend some money on it, I always do still think to myself, like, I don't want to spend, I want to save money for more as collectors. I think a lot of us, we want to constantly be acquiring cards and building out our collection. So while I struggle with the buy the best you can afford, regardless, and I'm not talking about the grade, just the best card for yourself, you just have to kind of take your budget and divide it up into, like, if I have 10 grand available this year or this month or this half year, and I want these cards are on my checklist, then I guess you have to really take your budget, split it up, and make sure that you can fill your need to have more cards coming in.
But the cards will lead you. It's like if you're writing, you get to a point where it's like the characters are telling you what they want to do, right? So let the card be your North Star, meaning you may say, I want to spend this much on this card, and you see one that is eye appeal wise beyond what you thought was possible in that grade, and you're going to you love it. You love this card. And so you're going to have to go above your budget. You're going to have to allot more of your budget to reel it in. Yeah. And then you'll recalibrate accordingly. But the ideal, I think, is to always, to me, upgrading is finding the lower and lower grade card that, again, maintains that, what gets the pound for pound title belt, right? And that's the card you keep, right?
And what card, Matt, are you going to want to look at for the rest of your holding, the rest of your life,
Correct.
The rest of the time you're going to hold it? I want to bring up a comment here, John. James Gillum at 328 Pacific brings up I love this comment from James. He says, just wait for John to put it up on the screen. He says, just want the card. Does not have to be perfect. Vintage is not supposed to be perfect. Matt, I keep it up for a sec, John. I love this comment, Matt, because I'm going to give a personal example again. Back in probably the year 1999, I bought a 1953 Parker's Jean Beliveau. He's an all-time Hall of Fame hockey player. 53 Parkhurst. I bought it raw. I had it graded by PSA, came back a 5. Several years later, I picked up, and I forget how I picked it up, maybe from a friend, a PSA 7, and it looked pack pulled. And then I was like, well, I don't need 2 Jean Beliveau rookie cards in my collection, so I'm going to move one of them. And I put them beside each other. I'm like, you know what? This 5, it's got some toning around that white border. It doesn't have perfect corners. And the 7 was like, I don't want to say it, but almost like bleached white borders. And I don't know that they were or not, but very, very white, clear borders, nice straight edges, squared off corners. And I'm looking at the 2 and I'm like, I want this 5. I don't want this 7. So
you didn't like the plastic surgery look.
So exactly. Rodeo Drive. It looked like, the women. So I ended up selling the 7 and I kept the 5 because, like James Gillum says, I don't want my vintage cards to look pack pulled. I want them to look like they've lived a life. I want them to, now listen, I don't want them crumpled up. I don't want them with tears. I don't want them with a ton of paper loss.
Sweet spot.
Full of wrinkles. But I want them to have a nice, clear image. Centering doesn't have to be perfect for me. But I love, especially when you get back into like the T206s or the C Series hockey cards, the 9 cards in the 20s and 30s. Because I can't afford the higher grades, I want rounded corners, but I do want even, like, I want the corners to look, all 4 to have that same rounded wear to them. That to me is a card that if only we knew this history of it, if only we could look back and go through the provenance of that card, like that, the mystery of vintage, especially vintage that looks its age. I love that in cards. So I've sold off. Now I could have afforded to keep my PSA 8 Bobby Orr, my PSA 7 Jean Beliveau, and sold my lower grades, or keep them both. I could have done that too, but I don't need the doubles, and I wanted the card that I liked better. And I think listen, coming back to the beginning of the discussion, I'm not alone in that. I don't feel I'm meeting more and more people who don't care about the grade on the slab. They care about the look of the card inside, and to the point now where I sometimes don't want the best card I can afford. I want the card I like the most. So
which is the best, I'd contend.
Which is the best to me, for sure. Let's switch it up and talk a little bit about centering, because centering is the criteria of condition of a card that is getting the most attention now. I had a shop in the early 90s. I had a card shop from 91 to 94. And I mean, I was dealing in 60s, 70s, 80s, baseball, hockey, football, basketball. And I got to say, unless my memory is really bad, I don't remember centering being the end all be all. It was all about corners. Corners were the number one condition criteria in the late 80s, before I had a shop in the early 90s as well. Now it's all about centering. And I know you're a centering guy. Lots of people are centering people. I don't mind a card that is a little bit off centered. Like, listen, I don't want cards.
You don't have a choice.
Well, sometimes you have no choice. That's right. But I don't want cards that are necessarily going to be, qualified to get a PSA OC or MC qualifier. I don't necessarily want to bring those into my collection. I want the card to look nice, but I'm starting to wonder about a perfectly centered card. Is it too nice? And this might be something that I work through in my own head in the next few weeks, months. And I'm like, no, I want the best centering possible. But speak to your thoughts on the ranking. And hold on, before you go, the hierarchy, because for me, the most important criteria of a card's condition is focus/registration. To me, that's and surface wear. I prefer a card that is off-centered with a great registered image without any surface scuffs than a perfectly centered card that's out of focus and maybe has some surface issues.
Well, for me, yeah, those are tied for the top. I need a card that the image is what you're looking at. So the image has to be focused, not blurry. And I don't want a card where it's like I feel like I drank a bottle of tequila and I'm staring at it. And because some of the registration can be really bad. That's what makes certain cards, the 48, 49 leaf page comes to mind, right? It's very desirable. I'd take that card in a low grade, centered and registered, than sharp corners, off centered, blurry, high grade, right? So, so for me, image and centering, I want the image beautiful and I want it framed evenly. I also like rarity that's created by the card itself, not rarity created by the grade, not which is basically just created by some guy's opinion, getting whatever he's getting in the cubicle, at the grading company, looking at hundreds upon hundreds of cards a day. Why is anyone putting so much money into what that person says, right? Put it into what your eyes see. Like my friend at Heritage says, so the majority of these cards, the overwhelming majority, came out of the factory off-centered, which is a defect at the birth of the card, right? So the card was intended, my thoughts on centering, I've said this before, my thoughts on centering are the cards were intended to be handled by kids. Therefore, it is acceptable for the cards to have wear today, a level of wear that's acceptable and desirable to the individual buyer's eye and his preference. The cards were also intended to be printed centered, right? So therefore, I feel a centered card with some low to mid-grade wear that doesn't impact the eye appeal is, to me, the best card. Not something that's been chopped to have sharp corners and is off-centered and is blurry, but it says 7 or 8 or 9 on it. It's just not for me. So that's my feeling on centering, and I agree with you completely. I don't want a centered card that's blurry. I don't want a blurry card that's perfect. I'm not going to buy a perfectly centered card if the image I'm looking at within is got 3 eyeballs, right? So I think those two things go hand in hand. And what we're seeing is that due to how many buyers there are in the lower technical grades, cards across that 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe even up to 5 spectrum, let's get into mid-grade, that exhibit great centering, great image. These cards are continually setting premiums and premiums and premiums. There was a PSA 1 of the yellow number 53 Ruth at REA a little ways back that went, I don't know, $20,000+. But that was a pretty good investment in low grade, right? Again, we see what happened with the Shoeless Joes in low grade. That's another card where, the lips, finding one that's centered with the lips not being a mustache, but being lips, that's rarity, right? A 52 mantle that's centered, that's rarity, not a worked corner that's in a 6-7 holder, right? I like that rarity created at the factory in the form of centering and eye appeal.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I'm just going to read a couple of comments that have come in. John, don't really worry about bringing them up on screen. I'll go a little fast here, but there's a couple here. Defects of Life says focus on framing, not centering, which I think is interesting, because the wider the border, the less really that I notice the centering. Like take, for example, the 41 play ball Ted Williams rookie card. That card has a pretty thick border for the card itself.
The 40,
so you are going to know.
Oh, the 39. You mean the 30? The 39. Yeah.
39. My bad. You are going to notice when it's off centered, but it has more room to move. It can still remain framed nicely, even though it's a little bit off center. So I like that comment from Dude. And I've never thought of it that way, Matt, where focus on framing, not centering. I like that comment. I'm going to remember that one, Dufex.
I agree. Well, that's what I even called it before. I want the image evenly framed. Because I think of it like a picture. So
and sometimes like off center side to side to me is much less interesting than off centered up and down. I don't mind if a card has even centering side to side, but vertically it might be sitting a little bit higher, a little
side
bit
to side bothers me more too. It really does. Tilt most of all. Tilt, like I don't care if a 51 or 52 mantle is or any of them. I could live with some top bottom centering, but when it's like that, it's a no. But buy the best you can afford and buy the high grade, and look at a cockeyed card every day.
Root Beer GMT here said corners were everything in the junk wax era. And then Dufak says corners, not an issue today. Modern cards are basically throwing stars. 100% true.
That's a great point.
It is.
That's a great point.
And we're not talking about modern cards here today, but Dufex is definitely right.
Throwing stars.
This one, John, at 338, 1956 Tops guy says, registration is the name of the game. Does it hit my eye well? Do the great qualities stand out and hide the poor qualities? It's an interesting way of looking at it as well. And again, it's going to be really, what do you like for yourself? What do you want in your collection, and what's important to you? But again, for me, yeah. Now listen, even when it comes to registration and focus, some cards are really hard to find perfectly focused with perfect registration. So I'm willing to give a little bit, but as soon as it's like you said, with the lips and the mustache, or as soon as you can't make out their eyes, I kind of will just wait for I'll take a lower grade copy with rounder corners than a higher grade with.
And there's going to be a lot of guys. There's going to be a lot of collectors that want that at such point that you're ready to sell it, ready to move on to it. That's what's going to be really desirable. And again, it comes down to that buyer pool being so deep. But really, it's like you hit the nail on the head. And I know I've been repeating that a lot myself. It's what the individual likes. The notion of this influencer investment guru type thing, that's like JT Marlin boiler room shit. The notion of me going out and collecting based on what a bunch of strangers are going to find desirable, maybe or not, in 30 years. That I don't get that. I'm trying to enjoy life now. You know what I mean? I could be gone in 10 years.
So we've only got about 6 minutes left here, Matt. And I want to talk about having an eye for eye appeal, because there's some. I have a bit of a hot take, and it's a take that not a lot of people criticize or kind of make fun or don't understand some of these grade the grader services. You've got MBA, Mike Baker Authenticated. You've got the PWCC eye appeal designations that they give to certain cards. And people sometimes just say, "Whoa, how many stickers do you need on your card?" That sort of thing. I actually think that there's value to those services, and here's why. Because not everybody knows how, and it just can be based on experience, right? Once you've been in this long enough, you're going to know what to look for in a card, but not everybody has that same eye for quality. And if you don't, and some people are just blinded by the sticker, the label, the flip, by the grade, they don't even care. So these third party or fourth party eye appeal grade assessors can come in and really tell somebody, this is a stronger card for the grade. Now, people always, when I'm set up at a card show, especially the one in the Sport Card Expo in Toronto, I regularly, 5 times a day there, people will bring a card to me from another table and they'll say, "Hey, what do you think of this one? A Mario Lemieux rookie, or a Gretzky rookie, or a Larry Bird Magic Johnson rookie." They want me to look at it to get their opinion. Well, if I had a service like Mike Baker and I was putting stickers on, they wouldn't have needed to come to me. And I'm not saying I'm going to do that. I'm not. But my point being that my hot take is that I don't think that these services are a joke or bad. I think that they're there to help people who may not know that, this is some people. I've heard people recently say all 7s are the same, or someone said in my chat a few weeks ago, all 10s are the same. Are you crazy?
No. I mean, no. I mean, maybe in the modern space, yeah. But I agree with what you're saying. I sometimes will joke with friends about, like, why pay, whether it's to get a sticker from one company or the other, to grade the graders, right? I agree with you. There's utility there, totally. I just think that we should all be able to ideally do that for ourselves.
Well, I think
the need for that, it's born from insecurity, unwillingness to trust yourself, needing someone else to tell you it's good, so then you like it, right? It's like the cliche, like, "Oh, I don't like them. Oh, well, if you like them, now I'll like them." You know what I mean? It's just, you have to have strength in your own conviction, in your own eye, in your own taste, not feeling a need to go, "Well, do you like it? Do you like it? Are other people going to like it? Are guys going to want to buy this in the future?" You got to have that trust your gut, your eye, right? It's like, if you see a piece of art that really, really calls to you, that you love, listen to that, right? It's not, well, gee, are other people going to like this, and who's going to want to buy this, and because at the very least you're enjoying it. So I think, but I also think that the future is going to be some form of quantification of that centering, that eye appeal that you see those stickers doing, right? What I want to do is I want to go on a website that aggregates and is scanned PSA, BGS, SGC, and go, oh my goodness, this 3 of the 52 tops mantle is actually tied with 2 of the 10s for the best centered mantle on earth.
Right. That's interesting.
What premium is that card going to get when it hits Heritage or REA?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or Memory Lane, et cetera. So I think that's where it's going. I think what we're seeing with the stickers from PWCC and from the other place, the Diamond place, that is the beginning. But I think ultimately that should be quantified, and we should be able, and then you're going to see what we're seeing. We already see 1s and 2s and 3s go bananas when they're gorgeous, right? There's a 3 that sold at Heritage that I always show people from years ago, of the 52 tops mantle, that sold for like $130,000 or $40,000, which was a 3 beating many 6s at the time, right? And I think what's going to happen in the future, I don't know if it's going to be 5 years or 10 years from now, but you'll be able to look at a card and go, man, I think this card looks really great. And then you'll be able to go on a website that someone's going to do and say, wow, look at that. That's a 3, but it's actually tied for first in terms of centering.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna wrap up. We're just about out of time, but Diamond Yard Sport Cards made a comment there at 3:48 Pacific. Says Matt's right. Only reason to do MBA or another service is if you want to move the card and want to get top value. And my comment to that is, I think that is the only reason to get it done on your own card. Otherwise, like, why? You have your card, you love your card. There's no point in doing it. As a buyer, I trust my own ability to assess the condition of a card or the eye appeal. So I'd rather not buy a card because the seller's going to expect more money. I'd rather not have to pay that premium. I'd rather find a card that hasn't gone through that examination yet and know that I got a great card for the grade.
One thing I really want to add to that comment, and I do agree with that comment to a great extent. Also, as a sort of a appendix to that, trust the card. I had 2. I kept what I think is the prettier one, which is a lower grade.
Seconds, Matt.
Trust the card. You'd be surprised. I sold an extra signed 53 tops mantle at Heritage. I had 2 of them. I picked the prettier one. Didn't need a sticker. It went crazy because enough people are like you and I. There are buyers out there that don't need the sticker. There are buyers out there that know what they're looking at. So it helps, but we're out there.
For sure. All right. Well, Matt, thanks for jumping on with me. Fun conversation. I'm glad we got to talk about what I love, a part of my collection I just love, and I know you do too. We share that. Chat, guys, thanks for all your comments. Sorry we couldn't get to all of them. We're limited time. We're already over time. John in the back, thank you for engineering back there. Don't forget signatures for soldiers, everybody. You can leave your donation. It's on the bottom of it's on the ticker right now, gonzalesnut@hotmail.com. Next up, Ray from Philly on another broadcast, so check that out. Thanks, everybody. Hobby Palooza 2023. Sports Cards Live. Check me out on my channel, and happy to see you there. And check out Matt on Instagram. Maddie, what's your Instagram? Maddie C Collection.
Maddie C _ collection. Maddie C Collection. I think. Yeah.
There we go. All right. Thanks, Matt. Thank you, everybody.
Later.
Thank you, John.